going at Sportman, puts it up and scores! Touchdown, Michigan! Hollis off the Heisman! And listen to this going go wild.
Maryland now, 75 yards away, 59 seconds to play. They have one timeout.
The general consensus for the Maryland game was that it would be no problem.
Firing deep, a man is open, and it is caught for first down.
There was a lot of choice words being said to each other because we were embarrassed that they were moving the ball down the field at the end of the game like that.
I just remember my hands like stinging from clapping so much, trying to motivate them to go out there and pull this one out.
End zone, touchdown Maryland, 14 seconds to play.
At the time, a tie was as bad as a loss. Ties were lethal.
Our mission going into that season as fifth-year seniors was to win a national championship. We were scared to death.
If they get that two-point conversion, it's over. The year's over. Our quest is over.
On a brisk early November afternoon in 1986, Penn State's drive for a second national championship in 5 seasons hung on one play.
I'll always remember being on the sidelines and just holding hands with teammates and saying, come on, we gotta just make one more play.
I think I hurt my knee a little bit, and you're like, oh my God, I want to be out there.
Watching them break the huddle, line up, it's almost like it's in slow motion.
Penn State's entire season is on the line right here.
My mindset was, God forbid they make a play and they get that 2-point. I didn't want me to be the guy that was giving up that 2-point play.
Hitting, firing on the run, no! And the day is saved.
After that, I really don't remember a whole lot other than just people picking me up and screaming. I couldn't literally stand up probably for about 3 or 4 hours after that. And it just shows you how emotional some of these games can be.
In the 80s, Little State College and Penn State University really did become the capital of college football.
I think that might have been the greatest time in Penn State's football history.
By the late 1970s, Penn State had risen from the humble roots of Eastern football to become a national power.
Our games were more intense because we didn't necessarily have to worry about a conference. We were battling for a national championship.
There's a give to Warner, skipping to the outside. He's got the corner, touchdown, Penn State.
They were either playing in the national championship game or playing for a national championship every 4 or 5 years.
The 1982 Nittany Lions squad returned plenty of firepower, including quarterback Todd Blackledge and tailback Kurt Warner. And that level of talent, along with the new NCAA decision to allow non-medical redshirts, fit well with Joe Paterno's disdain for playing freshmen.
We weren't really thinking about settling for anything less other than winning a national championship.
You really saw this burning desire in their actions that, we missed an opportunity in 81. We're not going to do that again in 82. When that redshirt rule came down from the NCAA, I think he looked at it as a positive. I could pretty much redshirt my whole freshman class now.
I think there was 25 kids in our class, 20 of us redshirted.
I think those guys felt, including myself, that we were as good, if not better, than the guys that were there. Our practices on Tuesday were harder than any game that we played in.
We never looked at it as like we're not going to be playing that weekend. We looked at it as though we've got to show the coaches now that we can play.
Our offense usually played against a scout team, and I remember those guys. I mean, they were pretty feisty.
Warner, especially his legs, were off limits. And the same thing with Blackledge. I can remember one day in practice breaking free and going in and clobbering and Blackledge. And I mean, coaches from every which direction came out of nowhere, were all over me.
It was a blitz period where they were just picking up a linebacker. So we were going, and I hit Kurt pretty well, and then kind of jacked him and threw him down, and then he got up, and then everybody just kind of collapsed on me, and they're like, "What are you doing? Why are you trying to, kill our star?"
Shane came in and said, "I'm here to play football. It doesn't really matter to me who that guy is."
Kurt Warner came over to me. He asked me, he said, "Did you recruit that kid who takes his teeth out at practice?"
I said, you need to tone your guy down a little bit, okay, because he's nuts. And we don't need that today.
I said, well, you tell him. No, he scares me. I'm afraid of him. Could you just tell him?
Shane Conlon and the rest of the 1982 freshmen watched primarily in the Superdome stands as their mentors won Penn State's first national championship in the 1983 Sugar Bowl.
Going for the bundle. Garrity. Touchdown.
We all went down to the locker room afterwards. We all got to be part of that celebration. Yes, we were national championships, but I think my class, the guys that weren't on the field at the time, didn't really take ownership of that championship.
They were observing, as very young players, what it took to win a national championship, dealing with a Heisman Trophy winner on the other side of the ball. They had a template that no other Penn State team had.
One thing I always found interesting about Joe's philosophy, he said when you're in our position, you gear up about every 4 years for a national championship run. The years before was the beginning of his ultimate plan to be ready to compete for a national championship every 4 years.
83, it took us a little time to get our feet back under us coming off the national championship. It was something that Penn State never experienced before.
We went down to the Meadowlands and played Nebraska after the 82 season, and we got our ears kicked in. And I can remember coming back that night on the bus. It was just total silence. I was just so embarrassed by that performance, and I never forgot that. I don't think we ever forgot that.
They were actually a worse football team in 1984, and it seemed like things were unraveling.
2 years after winning a national title, Penn State slipped to an unthinkable 6-5 record.
You got a funny feeling in your gut, you're Penn State. You're not supposed to be 6-5.
We were almost embarrassed for the program because it was Joe's, at that point, that was his worst season.
It was not a real fun time to be around the team. It was very tense. Joe was very on edge.
When Joe had recruited me, he said that you were going to probably be able to play for a national championship in 3 to 4 years. When I got here and I saw what was going on, it kind of gave me pause, like, well, maybe this isn't going to happen.
The 1984 season was punctuated by a lackluster effort and a home loss against a 2-win Pittsburgh team.
Penn State is getting blown out for the second week in a row.
That's probably the most upset that I can remember him being. We just didn't look like a Penn State football team.
He was just livid. I think that's the only time I ever heard him curse, to be honest with you.
Coach Paterno picked up a chair and threw it, and it actually hit me. And then he did. He said, "You are a bunch of babies." And everybody, whoa.
My thought was, well, you're calling me a crybaby, and I'm not starting, and I'm on the bench. There's nothing that I can do from the bench.
And by then it was clear that the underclassmen were better, and they started to shoulder their way into the lineup. But Joe was always very big on loyalty, very loyal to his seniors, sometimes to the detriment of the team.
I think that's when Joe said, okay, enough with these seniors. Listen, we're going to get the best guys in there, regardless.
The winter conditioning program and spring practice was the most difficult thing I've ever been through. And he specifically made it that way because he wanted to see, are these guys as good as they think they are?
While everybody said this is going to be a great recruiting class and will form the nucleus of a championship team, we really didn't get an opportunity to see them contribute a great deal in 83 or 84 for that matter. That's why 85 was such a surprise.
He's intercepted! Mike Sarnich! Touchdown, Penn State!
I believe Maryland was ranked #1 preseason. That really set the tone for the rest of the year because nobody expected us to win.
There into the end zone goes Dozier.
We had a little bit of momentum going. We weren't supposed to be good. We were winning a lot of close games. 6 or 7 of those games came down to an onside kick at the end of the game.
Joe said a couple times in squad meetings, you guys have really surprised me. I wasn't thinking we were going to be this far until next year.
We had gone from being, kind of another good Penn State team to, oh my gosh, we're now #1.
Looking to cap their unlikely season, the top-ranked Nittany Lions went to the Orange Bowl to face #3 Oklahoma, knowing a win would secure another national title.
I happened to overhear Barry Switzer telling a group of Oklahoma writers, "We'll win, we're better than they are."
I still got the feeling that Penn State couldn't believe it was there. They were blinded by the spotlight. There's always that feeling as these guys might not be ready for Oklahoma.
We felt like that we could play with Oklahoma, but I wasn't sure if we felt we were better than Oklahoma.
I can remember Ray Ison, our starting safety, going down with an injury, and they bring in the backup safety, and the very next play,
Jackson has it. The All-American tight end is going in, and Oklahoma takes the lead.
The Sooners dominated the Lions in a 25-10 win, leaving a sour taste at the end of an otherwise rewarding season.
The morning after the game, you open up the Miami Herald, and Bob Rubin, the columnist, used the word fraud to describe Penn State.
It's hard to describe the disappointment. That was probably my worst moment at Penn State, just seeing the disappointment in everybody's face.
the fifth-year guys, myself, Shane Cullen types, they had a chance to leave if they wanted to. I can remember on the sideline in the locker room, just looking each other in the eyes. The guys were crying and hugging, and just we knew we could do it. We knew how close we were. That night, we committed to coming back and giving this thing another try.
That graduating class of 1986, they were freshmen when Penn State won its first national championship. So there's no way that guys were going to leave without, you know, basically cementing their place in Penn State football history. So no one was going anywhere.
One of the things that Coach Paterno did right away, he said, look, you guys know what you got to do. He says, there's no point in you guys going through spring ball. Focus on your studies, work with these younger guys. He said, but I don't even want you out here in the spring.
Something unique about the 86 team is Joe didn't name captains, or we didn't vote on captains until the end of the year, which I think showed the character and the bond that the 86 team had.
We felt like we were the best team in the country before the season even started. And we were playing Temple at home, and it was going to be bad for them.
The 1986 season marked the 100th year of Penn State football. The opener versus Temple was also the first night contest in Beaver Stadium history, a football game wrapped in celebration.
There were no night games. I mean, it was all 12 noon, 1 o'clock. So under the lights back then was a big deal.
Schaefer looking. Touchdown, Penn State. The pass to fullback Steve Smith.
Penn State added Jim Caldwell to the coaching staff, and he introduced more of a controlled, short passing game. It gave us a more dynamic offense.
Quarterback John Schaefer posted his first career 3-touchdown game in a 45-15 romp, a game that helped ease the trauma of a forgettable performance 8 months earlier in the Orange Bowl.
John Schaefer had a horrible night passing. He threw 3 interceptions.
I remember standing on the sidelines, you know, feeling very dejected, feeling like, oh my gosh, this was our one shot in my 4 years, and I blew it. Coach Bob, who's the quarterback coach, said, you know, you don't have to go out and meet with the press if you don't want to, and I ultimately did.
You know, they were bad throws, and they just, you know, they killed. And it's just too bad that the performance of one person can hurt a team like it did today.
And he manned up, and he stood there and answered every question, and I've never had more respect for an athlete than I did for him that night.
Our passing game hurt us. It didn't help us in any way.
Coach Paterno said, listen, I just want you to know that you didn't have to say what you said after the game, but that the position is now up in the air. It's not your position, and a quarterback controversy was created.
Despite being a national championship contender, head coach Joe Paterno gave backup Matt Kisner a chance to unseat the incumbent Schaefer at quarterback.
I remember driving down Beaver Avenue. I went through a yellow light, I swear, and the cop came out, and the crowd had recognized me and started to kind of, you know, yell and not very nice things. And the cop, you know, came over, took my license, and kind of basically said, okay, it's time for you to go.
John walked into the locker room, and I said to him, John, I heard a new one. I hear the government's calling you, and they're going to send you over to Iran because if anyone could overthrow the Ayatollah, you can.
The amount of importance that was placed on that game, I underestimated. And the view that I had played unbelievably poorly, I underestimated. There's nothing more important in life than having that position. When that position's taken away from you, it's awful. And you have to go back to your dorm room and call your parents. And when your parents say, hey, how'd practice go? You have to say, geez, I'm not wearing a blue jersey anymore.
It's very clear-cut in Paterno's system the way he did it with the jersey. So You knew by the colored jersey you had where you were aligned, and that would change daily. Matt and John, the quarterbacks, they will alternate jerseys as well.
It changes or shakes confidence. As you take the ball back to throw, you question yourself 5 times. Can I complete it? Can I complete it? Can I complete it?
Every opportunity we had, he was working. He'd get any wideouts that were on campus or anybody available. Even his roommate, Mark Sickley, was an offensive lineman. He'd make him go out and catch balls.
So he throws down the gauntlet and he says, okay, you need to be better. In Joe Paterno's mind, that's a challenge that he put out to his quarterback, not a challenge that he wanted to pander to the press about.
The debate was heightened by a summer poll in the Harrisburg Patriot News, the result of which supported Kisner by over 80%.
Joe didn't like it for sure because he didn't want anybody telling him who he should play or who he shouldn't play.
I don't have a problem. I think the fans have a problem because they all want to know who's going to play quarterback.
There had always been quarterback competitions at Penn State, but nothing where the public got so involved and so vocal about it.
Did I like it? Absolutely not. Did it put more pressure on me? Absolutely. Do I still think about it sometimes? Definitely. And sometimes it still makes me mad. But that's life.
Quite frankly, we were a part of it too, because I think some of us felt that part of the problem we had in the Orange Bowl was maybe we should have switched quarterbacks at that time. If we had a poll going into the season as to who would be the quarterback, I think the team would have probably voted for Matt Kisner.
Joe asked for everybody's advice as to who we would pick as a quarterback, but some people thought Matt should be the quarterback, but John was the guy that they picked.
The Temple game couldn't have gone any better for John than it did. The players didn't have to answer the questions anymore about who's your quarterback going to be. All we had to do was say, look what John did, he's our guy, and then we could just focus on the rest of the season.
Cincinnati had always given us a tough time. Every time we played Cincinnati, they were always close games.
They had a pretty good football team, better than I think people gave them credit for.
Here they come. The pass is complete on the flat.
It was a quick tempo passing offense where it was a 3-step drop and he got released the ball. I mean, at that point, really nobody was doing that.
And the kick is good. Cincinnati takes the lead at 17-14.
And they had the ball at midfield, and all they needed was a first down to run out the clock. Well, they tried to run a dive up the middle.
Taylor stopped them. They stopped them.
You pick out the top 5 plays of the season, that was one of them.
With a precious 6 minutes left on the Beaver Stadium clock, Penn State trailed Cincinnati 17-14, and the Nittany Lion offense faced a do-or-die drive.
I got called to go in on 3rd down and ran a seam up the middle.
When you drop back to pass, you kind of have a rhythm and a certain kind of clock that says, okay, you should throw the ball now. And that clock had expired.
That fires upfield, open, Thomas got it, 1st down.
They probably think I wasn't going to get the ball, late in the game on that play. That's not something that we did.
David Clark, driving, touchdown, Penn State.
I don't think if we'd have completed that 3rd down, it would have been a national championship that year.
The Nittany Lions' 23-17 escape over the Bearcats was a microcosm of the offense-defense dynamic.
Joe, being the offensive line coach, was always on the offensive side. But there were occasions when he would come over at halftime and say, listen, we're stinking up the joint out there. We're going to get you guys some points. Keep doing what you're doing.
In practice, they, saying y'all got to put some more points on the board and things of that nature.
Schaefer on the roll. Fires end zone. Is intercepted in the end zone.
I remember going out when a turnover happened on offense once, and then the offense would yell at us, come on, guys, you got to stop them. And we were like, what do you mean? We've been stopping them the whole game. You need to score some points.
As defensive players, we felt like, we were the best players on the team. We always felt like we were good enough where we could almost pitch a shutout every game, and the worst you could do is tie, right?
It was like narrating the old serial, The Perils of Pauline. It was fraught with peril, one bad play, and the result was going to flip. This wasn't one like the Miami schedule where they just romped over everyone.
While Penn State was handling East Carolina, number 2 Miami was running all over number 1 Oklahoma, 28-16.
They're the defending national champions. They have great athletes there with speed, and Miami destroys them. Are you kidding? You know, who's going to beat them?
Miami was just, kicking everybody around. So the sense was, could Penn State hold up its end of the bargain?
We had no control over who we were playing. We were being, somewhat disrespected in the media. It was all about Alabama, and it was nothing about us. And if I recall, in 1985, we played for the national championship, and they didn't.
After what was largely described nationally as an unremarkable 6-0 start, number 6 Penn State stood face-to-face with number 2 Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
The mindset and the focus was all toward Alabama. I mean, everything that happened in that early part of the season, it was all looking ahead to that Alabama game. The game was going to be played at Alabama, where Penn State just traditionally had trouble down there. The only difference was Bear Bryant wasn't there this time.
Ray Bowers having a few words with them down there, and I would suspect there'd be a lot of talking today.
There was no way that we were going to lose that game, just because the intensity in the locker room, and I think from the get-go, we just took it to them.
Shoots it up the middle, touchdown!
That's the week when one of the announcers was calling DJ Thunder and was calling me Lightning. Offensively, we went up there and shocked some people.
Seal block, touchdown!
I remember leading on a sweep on the right side and made a block that allowed him to score. So I'll tell you, that was probably the best play that I had that day.
It's kind of interesting to see a reverse on the 5-yard line, which I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, Penn State running a reverse like that.
We're in the press box going, holy man. Nobody does that to Alabama. This is what we've been waiting to see.
The Penn State offensive unit has the Alabama defense guessing, and they're whipping them right now.
Trailing 17-3 with 10 minutes remaining, Alabama faced a 4th down in Penn State territory.
Ball is loose. Penn State's got it.
Just remembering going off the field after making the play that we were just that confident that this is it. We've won the football game.
I think that was one of the most balanced performances, offense to defense, I think that we had. It wasn't high scoring, but from our perspective, it was a blowout.
They really shocked the world. I don't think Alabama expected Penn State to be that good.
The seniors and fifth-year seniors that came back, that moment right there was why they decided to come back, is to perform the way we performed that day.
I got a question from a reporter in Alabama, at the Fiesta Bowl, saying, what exactly did you guys do to us when you played? I mean, we're playing for the national championship, and they hadn't gotten over it yet.
We had some games one after the other, and the pressure's mounting now. And as that pressure begins to mount, it takes its toll on you.
Following Penn State's dramatic defensive stand in their 17-15 win over Maryland, the Nittany Lions took to the road for a blockbuster clash with emerging rival Notre Dame.
That was a very heated rivalry, at least from our standpoint. I mean, we couldn't stand them.
A lot of the guys we recruited who didn't go to Penn State went to Notre Dame, and vice versa. For them to beat us in almost the last game of the year would have made their year.
Erline wants to throw, does throw, Brown, touchdown!
The crowd was howling, and I thought, well, this is the end of the dream.
The Irish, behind a raucous crowd, clung to a 13-10 lead late in the 3rd quarter.
Strong safety ends up picking me up in man coverage, and I get a step on him.
Down the middle, tight end, Cyberling, big play for Bryant.
That was a huge momentum thing for us.
Pastor Roundtree was a complete setup. Joe Paterno all day had been watching the right cornerback, unbeknownst to me. My first thought was, don't mess it up. Just get the ball to the good receiver, he'll catch it, and he'll run into the end zone.
Roundtree's wide open, touchdown!
It was one of the best play calls we had that season.
We were dominating Notre Dame, and Joe pulled the plug on us. He said, we don't want to take any chances.
Nursing a 24-19 lead in the final minute, Penn State defended the 6 yards that stood between Notre Dame and an upset.
You could see those linebackers coming back to that huddle, and they were winded because every play was hurry up, it was pass, and they were chattering at us D linemen. Hey, let's get something done.
Bobby made a great move. He's supposed to, on the defense, supposed to line up on the inside of the guy and come in. Well, he lined up on the outside.
When the ball was snapped, My initial step was to his outside shoulder to get him to open up, and he bit. So when he opened to the outside, I did a crossover step and a swim move, came back underneath in the gap that I needed to, and there was my man Berline waiting on me.
Berline is sacked back at the 20-yard line by Bob White.
But you could see Berline's eyes were like, he couldn't believe, like, where the heck did this guy come from?
I just remember thinking, okay, we dodged another bullet here.
The Fiesta Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, a lot of people to be involved in where the Lions will play their 12th game.
I remember going back in the locker room and knowing that the landscape of the top 5 teams in the country had changed. We knew that we'd probably be playing for a national championship.
We kind of saw, you know, there's a chance number 1 versus number 2 could be Miami and Penn State. And none of the other New Year's Day games could put that game together because they all had a conference tie-up.
A loss by Michigan today just eliminated the Rose Bowl from any hopes of having a national championship game.
In an unforeseen development, the early November calendar saw a pair of independents, Miami and Penn State, atop the polls. Sensing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, bidding and posturing commenced in historic proportions within the bowl industry.
There was so much talk about where's Penn State going to go, who are they going to play. This bowl wants them, that bowl wants them. It was a nightmare for the media.
Miami really did hold all the cards. They could go wherever they wanted to go. Art Watson was the president of NBC. He laughed at me. You know, you're not going to ever be able to match those guys up at the Fiesta Bowl, Myers. They got too many options.
I was at a lot of these All-American functions with Vinny Testaverde and some of those guys, and they were like, we want to play in the Orange Bowl. I was like, wow, you didn't, that kind of blew me away. You don't want to play the next best team?
Jim Tarman, who was the athletic director, said, by the way, Joe wants to meet with you. So we met at a pizza parlor in State College, and he said, I really would like to play Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. And one other thing he did say was, you know, I'd love to play the game in the Fiesta Bowl, but if they want to play it in a parking lot in Brooklyn, I'll play them there.
Pressures from all sides, fans, media, and more vested interests left Miami no choice but to face Penn State. After weeks of lobbying, the Citrus and Fiesta Bowls became the de facto finalists to host the matchup.
I can remember going to the Penn State Notre Dame game, and Notre Dame was driving at the end of the game. And I remember thinking, do I want them to score or not? Because if Penn State wins the game, the national championship could go to the Citrus Bowl.
I began to plant stories on the East Coast with reporters I'd gotten acquainted with. Stories like, Jimmy Johnson is afraid to play Penn State. He doesn't know if he could beat him on a neutral field. And it made Johnson furious.
We came up with the idea, let's not play this on New Year's. Let's play it prime time on January 2nd, when there will be no other athletic events, no other bowl games going on.
So I got on the phone with the entertainment division, prime time on January 2nd, on a Friday night. We'll have a huge television audience. They got back to me and said, good idea, we'll do it.
The notion that you would up the ante to create a specific matchup was foreign to that time, and the notion that you would move the date of the game to create a Friday night primetime game was completely foreign. It was the transition from an era where 1 versus 2 was very hard to pull off to an era when 1 versus 2 is not only expected, but it's demanded.
The kicker before me was Brian Franco, and I come in as a freshman, and I'm out there in warm-ups, and I am just shaking like you wouldn't believe, nervous as anything. And I hear the crowd chanting something. I thought they were saying, we want Brian, we want Brian. They were saying, we want the Lion. But, you know, I'm thinking they're saying, we want Brian. So it was definitely nerve-wracking.
Before number 1 versus number 2 could become a reality, Penn State had to finish their regular season with a win over Pittsburgh on Senior Day.
We knew that Pitt could beat us, but we also knew that, you know, we had a lot going right now, and, you know, these guys weren't going to let up.
Pitt had just scored to take the lead, and me as a sophomore at this point, always saying, you know, if I get the opportunity, I'm taking this thing to the house.
Heading wide to the right to the 10, turns to the 15, down to the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, right sideline into the 50, to the 45, goodbye, he is gone!
It was just one of those moments where the team needed something to energize them, and I was just fortunate enough that I was able to do that.
Dozier, 10, 5, touchdown, Penn State.
Pitt had guys like Tony Syracuse, and they had guys like Bert Grossman, and Dozier and Thomas just ripped them apart.
The Penn State Nittany Lions, for the second consecutive season, are undefeated during the regular season with a mark of 11-0.
We were finishing up the season with the Pitt game. Had a lot of weepy eyes out there knowing these kids are going to be going like that had done so much for us.
Penn State, Miami will play in the Sunkist Fiesta Bowl on January 2nd.
On Thanksgiving weekend, the games were complete and the matchup was set. Number 1 Miami and number 2 Penn State, the nation's 2 lone undefeated teams, would meet in the Fiesta Bowl on January 2nd.
We first started watching film of Miami the first couple of weeks. We were very scared, so there was an intimidation factor there, thinking, goodness gracious, what have we got ourselves into?
The more you watch, the scarier it got, so sometimes you just had to shut it down a little bit.
Hopefully we'll see y'all back here maybe January 4th. We'll be the only undefeated team in this whole country.
For any quarterback that had gone through what I went through in the Orange Bowl and the prep for that, I think there were no mistakes in this preparation. So there wasn't a time of the day that you weren't thinking about it or trying to prepare for it.
Joe came over, introduced me to the guys, and I obviously knew the senior class guys. He said, we've already won a national championship in '82, and you've got a great opportunity, and, you know, let's get it done.
Looking back in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have done some events pregame that we did with all those other games. We probably should have kept the team separate because there was a lot of tension.
The steak fry was kind of a joke because, I mean, the Miami guys were clowns.
Miami storms out. Jerome Brown gets up and says, did the Japanese sit down with the enemy before Pearl Harbor? He said, we're out of here.
Like, you're leaving where? Like, where are you going? Jerome Brown said something, and I said, you know, coming from a Rhodes Scholar candidate like Jerome Brown, you know, that's really warranted. Well, that was like on the front page of the Miami Herald the day of the game. And Joe's like, what are you doing? You know, can't you keep your mouth shut? I'm like, we're going to be fine. We're ready to go.
We were supposed to practice before the game. He canceled it. He didn't ask us. He told us, we're not practicing. We're ready to play.
I'd been to a lot of big football games, but the stadium that night had an eerie feeling. It was almost explosive.
In the 5 weeks since the announcement, number 1 Miami versus number 2 Penn State quickly moved from championship game to national event.
You knew it was going to be probably the most watched football game possibly ever in college football. So you knew you were really on stage.
There were 1,500 media, and a normal year was 200. You know, it was a Super Bowl size as far as media.
It was the biggest game I've ever played in. And I played in some Super Bowls also. We've been this far. We've been this close. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
The Miami team just came out and ran right through the Penn State players. And Bauer was, you know, he was a hot-button guy anyway. And he just grabbed a football and threw it and hit Michael Irvin right in the back of the head.
That really fueled the fire even more for us. You know, we wanted to, that made us angry.
It was very liberating to finally get to a point where you were let out of that tunnel and there was that Arizona night sky, all the flashes going off, and it's like you were running on a cloud.
I knew the first play of the game was going to be a pass. That was uncharacteristic for Penn State. And I dropped back, and I think Stubbs or Brown were in the backfield before I was. And so I could tell in our first series, we hadn't arrived to the field yet to play the game.
Just fired Miami's defense up. They all week saying we weren't any good. They thought they had justified it.
We had a safety that really set the tone of that whole game, Ray Ice.
Throws a strike to Irwin. He's hit and jars the ball loose and is rolling around, and Penn State has recovered.
You hear this crack, and then Ray's up laughing. Yeah, it still gives me chills.
As high up as the press box was, it was the kind of hit that made you wince, like even that far away. And that just changed the whole feel of the game.
You look at that film, you tell me if he ran the same speed, the same route, the same speed coming across that middle again. No way.
Our defensive secondary, I think, was the first part of our team that gained its confidence, and I think as a result of that, we all kind of fell in line.
Miami forced a Penn State turnover to gain a short field, and the Hurricanes drove 23 yards to score the game's first touchdown.
That was kind of the first, okay, stop worrying about, playing in front of a lot of people, playing in front of the national championship. This is real. Let's go play the game.
4 minutes later, the Lions crafted their only significant drive of the night, marching 70 yards down to the Miami 4-yard line.
You're not sure if there'll be, Stubbs or Brown, kind of waiting for you, or you're going to be wide open and have to make a play. I didn't really see anybody wide open, so I said, okay, we have to figure out how to get into the corner of the end zone.
He pump fakes, dives into the end zone, touchdown.
He's running the bootleg, and you timed it with a calendar.
With the score tied at 7, the Nittany Lion defense continued to frustrate the high-powered Hurricane offense.
They just created a huge problem for us. Not only did they have a pro-style passing game, they had a bunch of pros who were doing it. We literally put in 150 defenses for the game, so that was 150 different looks that we had not used during the regular season.
Some of them, the verbiage was very long. I remember some was 11 words long, 13. You couldn't even fit them on the card.
Our nickel back became Conlon. We moved him to like a backfield position. And Shane, he's a playmaker.
Pass is picked off by Shane Conlon at the 26-yard line.
I just dropped back, and the ball's right here. It's right in my face mask.
Testaverde threw it right to Shane Conlon.
I think Vinny really got frustrated. A couple of those passes, like, whoa, where are you throwing that to?
In the commercial break, my partner, George Paterno, he said, Vinny has no idea what they're doing. He'll never figure it out.
Early in the fourth quarter, the Hurricanes held a slim 10-7 lead. With the Penn State offense stuck in neutral, linebacker Shane Conlon swung the momentum of the game.
Fires it over the middle, and it's picked off by Conlon. Down the near sideline, inside the 10, stopped at the 5-yard line.
He was limping while he was running, but it was just that gritty, we're not going to lose this game, doesn't matter what, attitude that whole defense had that night.
That's obviously to play the game. I mean, they talk about all the other game plays. But that play was the key to the whole game.
On a handoff to Dozier, straight ahead into the end zone, touchdown.
I remember watching the hole open up and see DJ go through, and I thought, oh, thank God.
Late in the fourth quarter and still trailing 14-10, Miami regained possession, needing to mount a final drive.
It was that type of team. They had been living on the edge for so long that you just kind of knew it was going to get to that point in time.
This could be it right here.
Miami and Vinny Testaverde faced a do-or-die 4th and 6 at their own 27.
Pass on the flat, then it is caught for a first down, and then some.
He just kept running. And you didn't know whether he was still in bounds or not. That's when we said, oh my goodness, we're in trouble.
You now started to have leak into your mind, this is a Heisman Trophy quarterback. They have to score. This is how they're going to win. I remember standing there thinking in my head, oh my gosh, this may happen again. We may have a chance to win a national championship, and we may lose the national championship.
Over the middle, and it is caught at the 10-yard line.
The first thing I remember about that huddle is everybody just bent over, dead, exhausted.
You know, it felt like they were kind of going downhill on us at one point.
Jimmy says, we're going to run Highsmith here. And Vinny says, no, I'm not going to run it. And Jimmy says, what do you mean you're not going to run it? He goes, I'm not running the football here. We're going to throw the football.
If they would have just ran the ball, they could have probably walked in. They would have walked in. They had us. Somebody was saying Timmy Johnson looks tired. Sure enough, he makes the big sack on Testaverde.
Looking into the end zone, and he has his head taken off from behind.
I walked over to our coaches, and we were deciding what play we were going to run. Joe came over, and he said, well, what do you think they're going to run? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, okay, and he turned around and he walked away.
I'm praying at this point, you know, being a nice Italian Catholic.
Here it comes, one play for the national championship. Back goes Testaverde, trying to win it. Throws into the end zone, it's intercepted again. Picked off by Giftopoulos. And Giftopoulos has gift-wrapped the Penn State National Championship.
The feeling I had at that time is just like, wow. And you run over there and you hug. Unbelievable. Best game I ever played.
I've never seen so many grown men, you know, just a lot of hugging going on, knowing that we had reached our destination. You know, just get the chills talking about it.
That's the one time I've had that feeling in my life, and in a sports venue. You won, I mean, the biggest game of your life. It's our last game as a college player, and, you know, we won.
I'm a great believer in self-fulfilled destiny kind of thing. And I think these guys just literally had made up their mind they were going to win a national championship.
Paterno, he was just in a state of shock almost. So he said, you know what, it was the greatest game I think I've ever had my kids play in, but I don't think I'd ever want to do it again.
The 1987 Fiesta Bowl is still, one generation later, the most watched college football game in history.
People write books about it. They mark time every 5 years or every 25 years. They want to talk about it. And I can't tell you the number of people that remember where they were when that game was played. Jimmy Johnson gets to say it was the worst loss I've ever had in my career. It's great to be a part of that.
I see a lot of customers that are Penn State fans, and that's all they want to talk about. And they say, oh, you're probably tired of talking about the Fiesta Bowl. I'm like, no, man, bring it on.
That game is at the pinnacle of my existence. I talk to so many Penn Staters everywhere I go, and they talk about that game, so it's always in the forefront of my life.
It was a century of excellence in Penn State football. Coach Paterno was Coach of the Year. At times, when you really stopped and thought about it, it was almost overwhelming, all the different pieces.
The beauty of that Penn State team was we won a lot of games, we're certainly remembered, but we loved each other. We were successful because we had a great team.
Last time that we were together, completely together as a unit, was our trip down to D.C. to visit the White House with President Reagan. And I can remember sitting there, you know, almost welling up with tears because I realized that this is the last time that we're going to be together this way. And it was a good feeling, but at the same time, it was a very sad feeling.
When you're going through it, there's no perspective. It's because you're in the moment. But as the years go by, you realize like it was a really special team.
This really wasn't about football. It was really about healthy relationships. It was about a group of guys who were on the same page, who loved each other, who cared about each other, who would fight for each other. And oh, by the way, out of that came that magical moment where we got it all right and that one time at one night against a really good team and pulled it off.
I was sitting next to a guy, Mike Russo, our nose guard from the Bronx, and this immaculately dressed older man walks in the locker room. And Joe Paterno is about to introduce him, and Mike turns to me and says, "Hey, Trey, what's Mr. Coffee doing in our locker room?" And I said, "That's Joe DiMaggio. That's not Mr. Coffee."